podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV, or on social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today we have Tod Jacobs and Lynn. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Sophie. It's good to see you.
And you. So what we're going to talk about is a different approach to marriage. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves, please?
Hi, this is Todd. I'll just give you the brief background. Is I had a long background in the world of journalism and the world of Wall Street analysis, and then had a change of life around 20 years ago, and we decided to pick up our family and move to Israel and try to devote our lives towards helping young people develop the lives that they wanted to have. And so we opened up an institute in Jerusalem. I met my partner in crime, Lynn, who's with us today, about that time, about 16, 17 years ago. And since that time, we have spent really full-time working with people in their 20s and 30s and into their 40s, usually, with building their vision of what they want to do career-wise and how to get that, what they want to be expressing as people in terms of their ideals. And one of the outgrowths of that has been to help them through the creation of a vision of what they want in their love life, in their relationships, in their family and marriage, and to help them try to attain that. And we've done that through a combination of teaching them what some very ancient wisdom, which comes from Jewish mysticism, and Peter has brought a whole world of knowledge and research from the world of positive psychology, and we tried to blend those two ancient and new visions to help people get that marriage that they want.
Great. My background a little bit is that I started off in the field of architecture, and I basically decided that instead of focusing on building, physical infrastructure, that I wanted to really build people, and that basically led me to a world of really trying to do whatever I could to give people the practical tools so they could have the life that they want. Todd and I have been working together for the past 15 years, running an institute here in Jerusalem. And in addition to that, my background has kind of led me to pursue the field of positive psychology and organizational psychology. And really what we've been involved with is really trying to help people who speak about that. Everyone wants an ideal marriage. The question is, how do you get there? And what we've been involved with is really trying to give people those tools to actually make that a reality.
Okay. So before we go into your different approach, so to speak, let's just set the scene. So as far as you're aware, if we ask the person down the street, wherever we are really, what do they expect and understand marriage to be?
I think that people have an expectation that it's a funny expectation, but they have an expectation that marriage will happen in a magical way. Meaning, if you meet that right person, it's going to be great. And unfortunately, what we have seen is that paradigm is the exact opposite of what happens in real life relationships. There's a magic around marriage. There's a fantasy around marriage. And there's a dream about marriage that we just live with the idea that if that magical person comes into our life, it's going to get us to the finish line the most awesome way possible. And that's the exact opposite, because what we have seen so clearly over the years in our own experience and through the world of Jewish mysticism, and especially in the field of positive psychology, we have seen that life works in the exact opposite way of that. What happens in life is that there is usually a nice kind of initial boost of inspiration. And then what happens is things fade very fast. People have felt it many times before in a relationship where things go great initially and then things fall apart. What we have seen more than anything else is that great relationships don't just happen because you meet the perfect person. In order to get that marriage that you want, great relationships are built. And that is really kind of the opposite way people think about that. When we say this paradigm to people, there's often pushback because people have this fantasy reality of what a marriage should be. After we speak to them about it and we show them all the evidence for our case, it becomes quite clear that, oh, you're right, that magical formula isn't real. It's a fantasy world. And so I think this is kind of the major paradigm shift that we try and deal with, especially in our book, to get people to realize that the way you think about marriage and the way great marriages actually happen are two different worlds.
Do you think there's an element of age to a degree? What I mean by that is that a lot of second marriages, which normally would happen in the 40 plus kind of category, normally last. And if I just like when I started doing being self-employed, whatever, I started with events for single people. And what I found is that the younger the person was, what they were looking at when they were looking for a partner, unconsciously, they were looking at the wedding photo in the gene pool for the babies, in a nutshell. So not the live vision of a future or, you know, do we have things in common or anything like that. And often once this literally runs its course, because these people are not well suited, and they remarry sometime later, it often works. And it's often because we've actually picked not, you know, the perfect in their head person, but actually the person that suits them at the core. And most often than not, they say, it's not what I was looking for.
Right. Look, the choice of a spouse is a complex matter. Let me just address one thing, by the way, about second marriages that you mentioned. We actually looked into the research on how second marriages work out. Now, what would be the natural expectation and premise you'd work with? Well, if I'm married once and it falls apart, so now I know the kind of person I don't want to marry, then I know, you know, the kind of home I don't want to try to set up, and I know what doesn't work, and that drove me crazy that she was like that, and that I didn't like that he did that to me. It's, you know, the whole thing. So now I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. What we actually found, though, is that the divorce rate in second marriages is actually as high as it is in first marriages.
Fair enough.
Which is a pretty sad statement, and I think it plays to our fundamental belief that if I'm expecting bliss from my spouse and it's just going to come to me and I'm entitled to it, that is going to play itself out. I can get married 15 times and it will work out poorly every single time. And it doesn't matter that last time she was an aggressive person, this time she's a passive person, last time she was very warm and this time she's cooler, and last time she was outgoing and now she's more of an introvert. It doesn't make a difference, because at the end of the day, if I'm sitting waiting to be served and serviced, and I'm not taking the perspective in my marriage that I'm going to give to my marriage, and I'm going to give to my spouse, and I'm going to make that spouse the center of my life and my concern, I'm going to fail. And so I happen to be a believer that, you know, people can marry people who are very similar to themselves. People can marry people who are quite different than themselves. A Democrat can marry a Republican. Someone who likes Trump can marry someone who likes Biden. You know, if they are mature people who say, I respect your differences, I celebrate the difference you have between yourself and myself, but the key thing is I'm going to give to you because I care about you and I make you the center of my concern, center of my giving. And so maybe you're a little older than me, a little bit younger than me, different perspective, different philosophy. It doesn't make a difference. If I'm a giver, I can, generally speaking, make my marriage happen, and I can love you and build love between the two of us. So
how do you make a marriage work?
Well, you know, I think our first understanding of marriage is that you have to at least have a vision of what marriage is. You can't, you know, it's a funny thing. If you ask the average person, so what do you do for a living? They're not going to give you some kind of vague understanding of what they did. And if you say to them, how did you prepare for what you're doing for a living? They're not going to be vague. They're going to say, went to undergraduate, majored in economics, decided that I could, you know, do 2 years of an internship, and I felt I had to do an MBA after that. Or, you know, I wanted to be a social worker, so I did X and I did Y and I practiced. And then you say to them, well, and how about as you keep going? You know, how do you know that you're doing well? They're going to say to you, what, are you kidding me? I get reviewed 4 times a year. There's a bonus that I get or I don't get. I move up, I move down in the organization. My clients like me, my clients hate me. There's the feedback mechanism, constant work. I'm always, you know, trying to hone up on my skills. Now you ask them, well, how about your marriage? Did you do any prep for that? You mean prep for my marriage? I read romance novels. Oh, got it. Okay. And how about now that you're in your marriage? How you doing? Well, I don't get reviewed. I guess I get reviewed when my spouse yells at me. I guess that's a kind of a review, Okay. And how much remedial work are you doing on it? What do you mean? Like I come home, I kick off my shoes. We try to, keep a little bit intimate life, and I try to, we are so not thoughtful, not thought out, unprepared, and have a vision that our whole picture of marriage is wrong. The way we think about what it's supposed to be, and then the way we implement it is just a reflection of that poor thinking and that lack of understanding. And of course the result is half the people that get married wind up divorced.
Sorry, just quickly.
No.
I just recall someone that was supposedly working on his marriage, and to be honest with you, it wasn't working. All it was doing is that it wasn't leaving. It was still there. That was the amount of work that went into it. It just showed up every day, basically.
Right.
This is interesting. When we were writing our book, people said to us, like, there's tons of great marriage books out there. What are you really adding? And there are amazing. If I look at my bookshelf and the books I've given to students over the years, there's tons of amazing books out there. What do you need like another book for to give you another small skill? And really what we wanted to do was write a book, which was almost kind of the, the prerequisite for all these other books. Meaning, let's get clear what a marriage is and how it works. And then once you get that clear, now you can take all these marriage books and now figure out, okay, how to bring this more into your life and how to bring that more into your life. But if you don't know what it is you're trying to do, so that's a major problem. And really what we try to do with our book was try and do something which is totally different, which is give people that clear understanding as far as how this whole thing works and what we're going for.
Fair enough. And what would you say makes a great spouse then?
Well, I believe a great spouse is somebody who is in a constant. Now, everybody comes into this world broken in some way. Everybody comes into this world. I've got a natural anger problem. You've got a natural laziness problem. He's got she has a natural self-centeredness problem. We all come in broken. So the core of being a good spouse starts with being a good human being, which is to say, I want to fix myself. I want to better myself. I want to be the best version of myself. And that doesn't just mean I want the best six-pack, abs I can develop. It means I want to become, as giving, as loving, and as self-controlled as I possibly can, so that I can have a meaningful life. If a person is working on his or herself to make themselves a better person, that's a great start for being a spouse. Most of us don't have great rule books for being spouses. Some of us have never seen a good marriage. Some of us have, come from a couple of generations of broken marriages, and we've never really seen it. But an underlying caring, concerned person who has worked on themselves enough to not be self-centered, that's a really good starting point from which to jump into a marriage.
Do you think that a lot of people, and I'm talking in life in general here, but also in marriage or relationships, actually just lack purpose? They plod through it all?
Look, the reality is I think many people lack purpose in our society, in our generation. We live in a pretty broken generation from the standpoint that, none of us probably really believes in inherent worth of human life and dignity of human life and a spiritual pathway and things which are truly right and wrong. We're mostly just kind of trying to make it. We've gone from being quite a poetic world to a much more prosaic world. And with that lack of idealism and lack of vision has come, I will grab at anything which can give me some kind of immediate sensory or emotional stimulation. So we've become very short-term thinking. Mm-hmm. By the way, the cycles of technology, which make everything short-lived, right? I remember we had an old phone in my house. We had it for like 20 years, and nobody ever thought. I'm dating myself for how old I am. Okay, but now, oh my goodness gracious! If my smartphone is more than 2 years old, I feel like it's old and done, and I'm like out of date. And we have become so focused on constantly renewing a sense of, either sensory or emotional stimulation just to make me feel like I'm still alive, as opposed to something heroic or poetic that I'm striving for in my life. Well, okay, so my marriage just becomes another part of that immediacy, needing gratification, and I'm not really willing to work for it because I don't really get it.
And actually, it hides the deeper issues, isn't it? We focused on things that aren't actually that important.
And which we're doomed if we think they're going to make us happy. By the way, they say one of the things that is most likely to make sure that you have an unhappy life is if you spend your life seeking happiness. If you seek meaning and purpose and you do it through giving in some sense, the natural consequence of that, the mystics teach us, will be happiness. That'll be a natural consequence of living a life of productivity and giving, and a life which is more about the other, ironically will be the thing which gives you the most incredible sense of self and the deepest sense of happiness and well-being.
In the field of positive psychology, they speak about different levels of happiness, really. The lowest level of happiness is basically people who seek out the world of pleasure. Short-term, instant gratification. It's amazing in the moment. It's awesome in the moment. But it's the lowest level of happiness. The highest level of happiness is people who seek out meaning and purpose. And meaning is basically described as living for something beyond yourself. And the bigger that thing is, the more meaning you have in your life. So it's actually quite interesting that the world is shifting towards more and more instant gratification. The pleasures are getting that much greater. But really what's going to bring the most happiness is when people strive for something much greater.
And what I was just about to say was that the problem is that they do strive for more and more and more, and it's never enough, and they're never satisfied because it's always like the next thing. And I feel that it's the same in a relationship. You listen to people and they're really tick lists about, there wasn't this and he didn't have that, and they looked at all like the things that didn't work. They didn't look at like the things that actually were positive about the person, because oh no, that's not enough, I want more. And something that I hear a lot, not just like with the people I'm with in terms of customers or whatever, but whenever you look at social media, when you look at the TV, when you look at so many things, people just want more. They're never happy, they're never satisfied with anything.
Yeah, and Sophie, you hit on a very critical point for our society right now. There's a very deep idea that Peter shared with me from the world of positive psychology, which is called social comparison theory. Social comparison theory is that rather than deriving my own sense of happiness and well-being from some sort of internal measure that I've created for myself, instead what I do is I seek external measures for it. So if I see, and by the way, this is what advertising plays on and always had a role in kind of making us feel a little bit inept and a little bit underdressed and a little bit out of style. And, my girlfriend wasn't pretty enough and my clothing isn't new enough and my TV isn't fancy enough. But nowadays, now that we've gone into the world of social media and I'm spending all day looking at the lives that people are projecting, which by the way, are usually not a real, it's totally fake. I'm on somebody's Instagram page. I'm going to see that day specific images that person dressed up, dreamt up, made up to totally. But on the other hand, that's not how I perceive it, especially if I don't have great self-esteem to begin with. By the way, it actually turns out that people with very high self-esteem are not so bothered by this, but anybody below that is totally knocked out by it because, oh my goodness gracious, I'm not living as happy a life. My girlfriend or boyfriend isn't as good looking. I'm not as skinny. I'm not as pretty. I'm not, and so we spend our lives basically bombarded now with social media, feeling how lacking my life is. And by the way, that's a very rough place to be when I've got a spouse who, by the way, is now 10 or 15 or 20 years older than she was when I married her. And I don't look at the fact that I don't look the same way that I did. I look at the fact, well, she's had 3 kids. I remember when she was a size 4, she's not a size 4 anymore. And I remember, I'm not looking at the fact that, wow, I used to be brown and now I'm gray. I'm not looking at that. And all that happens is I'm constantly being bombarded with these images of how much better everybody else's spouse is and how much better and more exciting their love life is than mine. It's almost impossible if I'm trapped in that to ever feel really satisfied with my spouse.
I think one of the things that's also really interesting is like before the marriage, let's go to the dating point, right? When they start writing the online profiles, where the person has got to have a good job and they've got to have their own house and they've got to have this and they've got to have that. And then you say, oh, right, okay, and what about you? Well, do you have your own house? Oh, no, I live with my parents, right, okay. And do you have a good job? And do you have a nice car? Well, yeah, I'm working towards that. Okay, fine. But the secondary issue is that the job can go. You know, I mean, even more so now than ever. The looks can go because all you need is a good old car crash and you can lose your legs. You know, there's so many different things that may mean the person will be in different circumstances within 5 minutes on all aspects of life. And they're just looking for the wrong thing, as you say, because of, say, gratification or whatever. So if you go from the wrong basis at the dating point, you're never going to get the right foundations, are you?
That's exactly right.
And that's why we feel that, you know, one of the things that we try and really do a lot is, you know, it's one thing to get involved with marriages once people are already married. But what we feel where the work really is let's get involved with people before they get married. And if we can get people the right paradigms before they get married, we really think that can have a huge impact on what the world of marriage is. And it really what we've dedicated our lives to is really this world of marriage education. And like Tod said, you know, in our life, for everything else, we prepare for it. You know, I've been in school for years, getting a master's degree, getting a doctorate, everything is a world of preparation. There's nothing in life which doesn't come where you get ready for it. And all of a sudden it comes to our marriages and people just go into it in such a blind way. And the irony of the whole thing is that for people, it's their number one priority. And where we really feel that if we can begin to deal with marriages when people are early on in the dating process or people are still in the searching process, then maybe we have a real chance of getting people the end goal that they actually want.
Right, tough question for you. Because unfortunately, a large number of people don't realise they've got a problem. They think everybody else has got a problem, but certainly not them. So how do you address that?
You know, it's not an easy thing to address if the person is not open to the idea that I'm not perfect and I don't know
Not
everything.
if you're open, I mean, just because for ignorance, because we just don't know.
Well, you know, we have dealt, our students are anywhere from around 21 years old to around 40 years old generally when we start with them, and we kind of, you know, continue with them through life. That's one of the reasons that we wrote this book, was not only because we sought theoretical knowledge about marriage, but we have like literally been walking through the process with our students, you know, with hundreds of students and hundreds of relationships, and we tended to find that that in a sense, life has to deal you reality. If you're not an open thinking, open-hearted person, growth-oriented person, it tends to be that you will simply have to, and it's really unfortunate, it's very tragic, part of the tragedy of human condition. Many people, I can't say most, but many people will have to try and fail and see their life literally crash on the rocks before they will actually say, you know, maybe I got the paradigm wrong. Maybe there's a problem with me and not just what I have blamed as, you know, a whole procession of like, you know, not great girls that I've hooked up with. And so maybe I'm actually the problem, but it can take a long time till someone actually, you know, gets to that aha moment.
Definitely. And what would you say creates problems in a relationship?
I think that what creates the biggest problem in the relationship are totally unrealistic, and I'm not even sure what to say, our demand for perfection in everyone else. You know, it's fascinating. If you look at individuals, we demand perfection from people around us. Unfortunately, we usually don't demand that perfection from ourselves. But I think that what happens so much is that if, you know, like we spoke about before earlier, that we have this fantasy of what a marriage should be, We have this fantasy of how the relationship should develop. It should just be, I meet that person and therefore it just goes up and up and up and there are no issues and the passion continues forever. And I think that, you know, when all of a sudden people demand that it's got to be perfect, and as soon as it's not perfect, there's something wrong. I think that's probably one of the biggest blocks that gets in the way of a relationship. And unfortunately, what people don't realize is that's not the issue. That's really the opportunity. Because when now things start to get real, and you're no longer dealing with that just world of lust or that world of passion, now you actually have the ability to start building something, which is amazing.
And I think also it is building something, but it's building each other up and understanding that, you know, you are on a path, obviously, but if you go in the same path and you carry on with each other, and what I find a lot of the time with people when they come to see me is that they know the person, no doubt. They've been together 40 years. So they know how they want the toast buttered. They know how to make the tea or coffee or whatever. But they've forgotten to exchange and to speak about the minor details, which means that they've actually grown in separate directions completely.
We actually have a litmus test that we like to ask our, you know, the couples that we work with. And we'll say, for example, let's say we say it to the guy, we'll say, I want you to think about how you looked, how you smelled, how you dressed, how you spoke, how you acted when you first met this young lady. You know, and the answer is always the same, by the way. My hair was combed. I was freshly showered. I made sure that there was no stains. There was no stain on whatever I was wearing. I looked sharp. You know, I was, you know, either I was shaved or I was specifically not shaved, whatever was cool at the time. And I smelled good. And I remember, you know, we pulled up at the restaurant and I ran out of the car and opened the door for her. And, you know, I mean, you know, and on and on and on. And then you say, okay, get that snapshot in your head clear.
What happened last night?
Yes, exactly. How are you now? And then they usually just kind of clear their throat and kind of look down, and then they begin turning red. And, you know, and it's like, well, what changed exactly? Why? And then they'll offer up, well, you know, I was acting then. So you say, well, why were you acting? You know? And the answer was because I really wanted her to like me and realize how special I was and how much I cared about her. So we're like, okay, so how about now? You know, by the way, now if you really do like her, you don't need to act in order to do those things. And by the way, yeah, and 100%. And the other thing is, who says that you're allowed to stop acting? In other words, we feel in marriage, I should be able, by the way, I always act when I'm at work, right? I say the things I'm supposed to say. I never say the things I'm not supposed to say. I never look at anybody crosswise. I never lose my temper. All the ways that a person has to guard his or herself from doing the wrong thing and yes, doing the right thing in our workplace, no problemo. The guard is always up and never fully let down. Okay, well, now I come home, so I think, oh, well, I finally got a place I can let my guard down. I can say what I want. I can think what I want. I can criticize when I want. I can lose my temper. I can, you know, the whole thing. I can be as crude as I want, whatever it is. And that's totally wrong because the reality is if we ask a person who's the most important person in your life, or at least who's it supposed to be, they will usually say, my spouse, my better half, my beloved, my whatever, my lover. And so then the question becomes, well, how come you're not as careful with the way you speak to her or him and act and dress and smell and the whole thing as you are with people at work, or as you are even as you were with this person when you first met them and tried to convince them that you're such a great person? And there's no answer to that question other than I'm blowing it. I'm totally blowing it. So we, you know, so that's a little litmus test, which should get a person back to, wow, maybe I really should make sure that when number one, that I have a date night with my spouse, you know, every single week, that is more important than anything else. Number two, that before the date night, I make sure I smell good, I look good, I've done, you know, whatever it is I got to do to make myself, you know, look a little bit better and smell a little better, so that when we go out, it's actually fresh and it's exciting. One of the hardest things to keep a marriage is fresh. Keeping it fresh, because there's a reptilian part of ourselves which just all of the excitement goes away as soon as I get overstimulated or I get the stimulation too many times. I need more and more and more, just like drugs. Take a drug one time, it's awesome. Next time you need a little bit more, next time you need a little bit more. And so it is with every other type of stimulation. If all that you're looking for is a stimulation. But on the other hand, if you can add in the emotional content, and you can add in the intellectual content, and make sure that the relationship's hitting on the whole person, and that you work to keep those connectivities fresh, you really can, A, enter a marriage successfully, and B, you can revive a bad marriage and an old marriage and a stale marriage. You can revive these things. Yes, I know what kind of toast, how she likes her toast buttered, but what I really think she would like more than that is my saying good morning and how awesome it was that you did X and Y for me yesterday, and let's go out and have dinner tonight and let's spend some time together. And I can't wait to talk to you.
Well, Tod, Peter, unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of our time together. What would be the last thing that you would want to leave people with?
Well, we titled our book, Not a Partnership, How We Keep Getting Marriage Wrong and How We Can Get It Right. And people are usually taken aback by that title. What do you mean marriage is not a partnership? Well, I thought marriage is the partnership. Well, guess what? The way most partnerships work in business, they usually fail. Most partnerships in the world of business fail. Not because they have bad products, not because they have bad distribution and financing. They usually fail because partnerships work as follows. I have my rights and responsibilities. You have your rights and responsibilities. So you better keep your end of the bargain. Otherwise, I can't be partners with you. And how do most partners spend all their lives in the partnership? Always feeling they're doing the right thing and always looking at the other side and saying, you're not doing anything, you're not doing enough, you owe me, you owe me. And that's why many partnerships break up in business. And I think that attitude permeates the way we come into marriage. I've got my rights and responsibilities. What are you doing? What have you done for me? I did this, but you didn't do that. And you didn't respond to me and you haven't given me enough. That paradigm has to change. And we feel that if a person can walk into marriage saying, it all depends on me, and I'm going to make my spouse the center of my concern, then what happens is you can develop the real partnership that marriage is supposed to be, which is two people building something bigger than themselves and each contributing, irrespective of what the other side is contributing, and really building something beautiful.
I would say that I think that, especially with now with the situation that everything's happening, that people are probably thinking a lot about their marriages because you're with your marriage so much. Even though we're cut off from the world, we're not cut off from our homes. I just think that it's never too late to invest in the world of marriage education. And it's amazing what can happen whether a person is thinking about a marriage, whether a person is newly married, or whether a person is married for 30 years. If you actually stop and you spend time saying, you know what, I got to learn more about this. I got to figure out ways of how to get better at this. Maybe there is some paradigms out there that could help me. I think that unfortunately, the world of marriage is, again, as I've spoken about, is that it's the number one thing in our life, but it's the thing that we are the least educated about. And therefore, what I would encourage everyone to do is figure out a way, no matter what stage of the game you're at, to invest today in the world of marriage education. There are so many books, resources, therapists, seminars, online programs, you name it. The resources are out there and they're waiting, and what can be they can just add so much to your marriage, but it takes effort to begin to realize to say, you know what, I don't have the information I need in order to have that great marriage. Let me try and get it today.
Right, Peter, Tod, thank you so much. It's been fascinating talking to you. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, or more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.